Well, here I am. So I've had a bit of analysis paralysis making this channel. I've thought I need the best microphone. I need to have a nice setup that's not my messy bedroom. All these factors that have delayed me making this channel. But a lot of people have been asking me, go ahead and make a YouTube channel. So I decided finally, in the words of that girl from Frozen, to just let it go. And so I am just gonna let it go. Go with what I have, and we're just gonna talk about important stuff. You get to hear me yabber on about metaphysical topics, specifically afterlife topics and metaphysics, and what I think are some pretty important stuff that all of us need to know about, or at least be able to discuss and share information about. So a little bit about me. So if you just found me on YouTube, you probably don't know who the heck I am. My name is Cyrus. I run a group on Facebook called Afterlife Topics. I wrote a book called Understanding Life After Death in 2015. I write other books as well. Actually, I'm working right now in fiction writing, specifically kind of fantasy sci-fi. And I also work as an editor, and I do other jobs out here in sunny Southern California. But my main area of interest has actually been related to metaphysical topics and life after death. And in this video, rather this first video on the channel, I want to just go down to the real basics and ask the question: is there life after death? And that's one of the biggest questions of all. I mean, this is a debate that's been going on, for thousands of years. I mean, it was a major hot button debate with like Plato and Aristotle, and thousands of years later, it's still a major subject that, unfortunately, in the mainstream discourse, it often gets steamrolled by people who think they have all the answers. People who are in religions, people who are self-described atheists who insist that these topics can't exist. A lot of people who don't have access to knowledge about metaphysical subjects, about the phenomena of stuff that happens outside of your brain when consciousness goes outside the brain. And that is technically what the afterlife is. So we can take this on a very scientific level. And to me, that's the best way to approach this subject. So a lot of us are tired of the new agey stuff. We're tired of religion. We're tired of mystical interpretations, and we want the facts, and we want to know, what's going on here. Is there a way to answer the great mystery? Is there life after death? So I would contend that the answer is yes. Not only is there life after death, but we can ask the question and we can draw concrete answers. It's kind of like this red herring argument that people make when they say that nobody will ever know if there's life after death. It's the great question nobody can answer. And I don't agree with that at all. I think that we can look at evidence, we can explore this topic, and we can come to answers. We can at the very least say that there is some type of life after death, because it has been established consciousness can act independent of the brain. So you could take one subject, like precognition or psi or remote viewing, and you can probe into that world, and you will discover evidence of the brain acting outside the body. The U.S. military has known about this for many years, and they still have programs that work on levels of psi and intuition. And the more this knowledge expands, the more people begin to realize that the consciousness operating outside the brain is a very normal, very common thing that we can all learn to do more effectively, or to be able to have experiences on that level. The problem is that this whole world is extremely culturally and socially conditioned against these ideas. I don't know why. You could say, that this is part of a very, very long plot by the church to keep people indoctrinated. I mean, there is a reason why even today you'll hear people saying that practicing esoteric subjects or practicing psychic abilities is witchcraft or it's of the devil. Well, there's a very long-standing programming in our consciousness to dismiss and deny these topics, and that's a whole different subject. I mean, we could say maybe some of that's intentional, maybe some of that is happening as a way to keep humanity held back and to keep the powers that be in control, but I'm not going to go down that path right now. What I will say, though, is that a lot of information has been denied to you, and really it's up to you to find channels like this or anywhere and start to hear about some of the really crazy stuff that happens. So why do I think that there is life after death? If you just take all the evidence and combine it as a whole, it presents an extremely compelling case. So, there is my book, Understanding Life After Death, where I go into doing that specifically. But if you just want a rundown, I always recommend going to my old friend Victor Zamet's webpage. That's victorzamet.com. And he's the lawyer who presents a case for the afterlife. So there's over 20 areas of evidence on his site that he compiles together. So examples include deathbed visions, when people are dying and then they obtain veridical knowledge about loved ones who have died. As an example, they didn't know that their great aunt Edna had passed away because they hadn't spoken to her in a long time. Somebody's on a deathbed, and then they see the spirit of Aunt Edna walk into the room, and then they're able to verify that they passed away. So that's like objective knowledge. And there's a lot of researchers who devote a lot of time to that subject. There is crisis apparitions, when people encounters a so-called spirit, a personality on the other spectrum, who appears at a moment when there's a crisis happening, or that person just died. So maybe a cousin, just was in a car accident, and suddenly she appears to you and wants to tell you goodbye, and you didn't know yet that she had died, so it rules out the possibility that it was somehow being dreamed up. There's, of course, near-death experiences. It's a really hot-button issue. People always try to say, well, all these visions people have as they die, they must be caused by chemicals in the brain, or because there's like an electrical signal that hasn't gone out yet. And you can really explore this topic. In a nutshell, just to really condense it, people who are close to death or who have died, have experienced death, can report verifiable information. They can identify things in the hospital when they're allegedly out of their bodies. They can also bring back veridical information. There's been a lot of accounts of people who are blind who have NDEs and then they can see for the first time. And of course, it also dovetails with everything else. They report the same things. They go out of their bodies. They meet with deceased loved ones. They're in beautiful environments, and they get sent back. And this dovetails with subjects like out-of-body experiences that can happen when you're not near death. And this is something I've done many times, and the people who follow me on Facebook, they probably have heard a lot of these stories I'm always talking about. I've learned to be able to go out of my body a lot here in my bedroom and have some of the similar types of experiences that people report during these great mystical moments. Primarily, though, just the ability to go out of my body and find myself in brand new environments and be able to meet and talk and physically touch people who claim that they are people from this world who have died and are now living in a parallel dimension. And that's the thing. That's what the afterlife is it is a parallel dimension. It is a place where the physics is operating differently. Astrophysics refers to dark matter, so it's a spectrum, rather it's a level that's outside of our spectrum, because most likely, at least according to physicists like Ron Pearson, the electrons are spinning around the atom faster than they are here, and so to us it's an invisible, phantasmagoric type of environment. but to them it's as physical and real and normal as the world we're in right now. And so the best theories about the afterlife contend that when we die, we have this duplicate body that's already inside of that higher spectrum, higher density, and then we just shift into that body, and our consciousness changes. And this, of course, is something that I believe in because I've been able to experience it as well, as well as many other people I've spoken to who are in that area. And this goes back a very long time, and there's just so much information out there about that. But there are even more areas of evidence. You have xenoglossy, where babies are born with knowledge of a language, like a kid in Indiana can speak Mandarin and nobody knows why. Plus the reincarnation research out of the University of Virginia with Ian Stevenson that lasted about 20 years, and all of that is very well documented, very difficult to refute. There's mediumship, and despite what some of the mediumship critics and what the hardcore skeptics say, there are real mediums out there, mediums I've experienced, who have information that nobody else could possibly know about. There is the physical mediumship, skull experiments, Leslie Flint, other physical mediums who have compelling evidence. Again, don't listen to the mainstream narratives about some of these topics, because the hardcore skeptics will skew information and present very unfair arguments while glossing over all the positive elements that could lend credibility to those subjects. Gosh, there's so many areas of evidence. I could, probably just keep going and going. So I would check out Victor Zamet's site for a little bit more info about, just how many different subjects there are. But as an amateur researcher, what I've done, what you can do, is you can look at all those subjects, make up your own mind. But most reasonable people, when they take all that in, the conclusion that they come to is that there is something going on, at the very least. And it is highly closed-minded to take all these topics and shut them all down and say all of it is just people's imaginations, blah, blah, blah. And when you start having your own personal experiences, when you encounter a deceased loved one, or you go out of your body, or you have an NDE, or any of these fairly common things happen to you, most people are singing a different tune. However, they're still in a society that frowns upon these experiences and tries to cover up their existences. So many people who have these experiences are very isolated about it. They don't want to let people know about it because they don't want to be scorned, and they do get scorned, which is why a good education is needed about this topic. Well, in a nutshell, that's the answer to the question, is there life after death? My answer is yes. And probably a more moderate answer could be most likely, based on all the evidence, something happens when your physical body dies. I feel I have more of a solid understanding because of my own experiences, but I can't take my experiences out of my mind and stick them in your mind. It doesn't work that way. So I can sit here and tell you that I've communicated with deceased people. I've had communications with my mom, who passed away last year, and I've been able to sit with her physically and in an astral environment and ask her about her world and what she's up to. I have had some paranormal ghost experiences. I've had things happen to me that removes a lot of areas of doubt. So ultimately, I think it's a big misnomer when you hear people say that it's a question that can never be answered, because it is being answered. And as time goes by, this mystery is unraveling itself more and more. And with every little bit of information that's revealed, 10 new questions arise. It becomes very difficult sometimes to keep track of all that and keep your marbles. But it's ultimately very valuable, because having these experiences, studying the subject, has lessened my fear of death by probably 90-95%, which has allowed me to live, in my opinion, a more fulfilling, happier life, because I don't have to worry so much as everybody else does about the subject. Because, in my experience, um, you know, there is a very kind of normal, happy reality that exists outside of this density, outside this dimension, and it's nothing to be afraid of. It's a perfectly normal, positive place. There's no hellfire or any of these things, and we can all look forward to it eventually. And if you don't believe that, at the very least, I encourage you to study the material and take it seriously. Because really, at the very least, the material deserves to be taken seriously, and not enough people do it. As a final note for this introductory video, I should mention be cautious of where you get information from. On both sides of the spectrum, there's a lot of misinformation about this subject. As an example, there's people who just believe everything. Okay, there's allegedly channeled information, which, in my opinion, a lot of times is people's imaginations. There is people who are trying to make a buck. There's fake mediums, and when a fake medium is trying to teach about the afterlife, they're going to come up with all kinds of hooey that has nothing to do with reality. And you're going to have this really weird interpretation of the afterlife, something I've seen a lot since I began this work. A lot of people with really weird ideas. Like, I've heard people literally say, when we die, you become a perfect angelic being who has no emotions. And we come to Earth to experience emotions, and then when we die, we have no emotions. We're just like Data from Star Trek. And this stuff has no bearing on reality. It has no bearing with like legitimate spirit communication. And obviously, it's just stuff that people are making up, and then listening to those people making up the stories and then repeating that and spreading all this disinformation. On the other side of the spectrum, we have the hardcore skeptics, the atheist crusaders on the internet who think that all this information is evil. And it's almost very ironic because they remind me of like the hardcore religious people and the Catholics who say don't study the paranormal and don't practice these things because it's of Satan. The atheists just substitute the word Satan for irrationality, and then the internet atheists will say, don't study all this stuff because it's irrational, it'll pollute your mind with nonsense, and it's nothing to see, it's all people just manipulating you, don't study any of it. And these people are very militant about it, so they have a monopoly on like Wikipedia. So anytime there's any like para subject, Wikipedia, because the owner of Wikipedia sympathizes with like the hardcore skeptics, allows them to delete information that supports some of these topics, and allows them free reins to add as much stuff as they want, even if it's like speculative, even if it's unproven. They have access to put in all kinds of nasty things. For instance, like pages about mediums who are famous. Some of these mediums have been heavily tested, like Alison Dubois, heavily tested by Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona, underwent like triple blind conditions of study and still came back with positive results. But if you look at the like a Wikipedia page about her, I don't recommend doing it because to me it's just like, I don't want to give energy to that. But the pages are going to be very biased against them. Well, that's all I have to say for now. There's a lot more to study, and please subscribe and like this channel. If you don't subscribe and like it, then this channel is going to go nowhere, so I really depend on your help. You can find me on Facebook, join the group Afterlife Topics, and we'll talk more soon. Goodbye.